What's happening, everybody? Hope Message finds everybody well. And welcome to the Built for Pressure podcast, hosted by yours truly, Will Foden. For those that don't know, I'm an ex-professional athlete, a high-performance coach, and someone who's operated in the health and performance space for 17 years. And what this podcast is designed to do is reconnect leaders with their performance. What I want to do is understand, teach, and elaborate on all the mechanisms that help leaders regain their physical edge, actually turn their mental performance into a position where they can actually perform under moments that matter, and more to the point, turn potential into performance, not only for themselves, but for their team. Because I truly believe that you can lead yourself before you can lead other people. And what I want to do through the Built for Pressure podcast is give you a platform to be educated, have principle-driven information, and more to the point, action steps for you to take so you can dominate your physical performance, professional performance, and also from a personal development standpoint, grow, evolve, and meet like-minded people. Because this podcast is for that 1%. It is for the people that want to achieve the next 1% of their gain, so they know that they can have their physical, mental, and emotional edge through times that matter. Today's first episode, what we're going to be going over, is actually my story. It's something that I'm massively prevalent of, especially not just in the leadership space, the coaching space, or for anything of that reason, is actually we all resonate with stories, and understanding where the root crux of this comes from, I think will paint a massive picture of understanding why I'm so passionate around human optimization, peak performance, leadership performance itself, and actually how to become more self-aware, because I believe the inner game is reflected through the physical game too. This actually stems from inadequacy. I am from a very loving family in West London, Brentford, and I, as I mentioned, I used to play professional sport, really, but very much reversing back to when I was a young child. I was a fat kid. I played every single sport under the sun, but like I said, I was from a loving family where I think a lot of the time we get many people will talk around rags to riches, and they were put under pressure and all this other stuff. Actually, do you know what the superpower for me was as a son was I was in an environment where my parents backed me 100% of whatever I wanted to do. I was extremely lucky to have grown up in a loving environment where I got along with my sister. Most siblings want to kick the crap out of each other. Me and my sister are like best mates. Also, very, very different to me. She's a vegetarian, a yoga teacher, into dancing, and obviously those that know me, I'm a strength and power athlete, rugby player, self-proclaimed meathead to the best possible degree. But more to the point, we sing off the same hymn sheet as a family. And when I was younger, I used to play every sport under the sun. A lot of my friends from where I was from, I don't like the word delinquent is a wrong term, but they're getting on the wrong side of the law, doing silly things, getting into drugs and whatever. Where I was very, very lucky that I was placed into sport, not forcefully. My dad was a football player and a tennis player. He was not a rugby player whatsoever. My mum, forgive her, she's a little sausage, and she's definitely not a rugby player either. But I was very lucky to be backed. At one point in my youth career, I was playing county rugby, tennis. I threw javelin for London and Middlesex, and also I played cricket for Middlesex too. And tennis was actually my game. There was one thing that actually me and my dad shared was I played tennis since I was 4. I played rugby since I was 8. And as I grew up, I was playing at a competitive standard. Now, from a health and performance standpoint and where my coaching practice stems from, and as from an athlete, I was in year 7. I was in a swimming pool, and a girl called Fore called me fat, and it absolutely changed my life. I suddenly realised that I'd put on weight. I'd been injured for 12 weeks. And I was the kind of kid that I'm not really into sweets and chocolate. I was the kind of kid that I'd eat two roast dinners, and that for me has been the what was the catalyst for me to actually take charge of my own performance when I was younger. I lost 2.5 stone. I didn't have an eating disorder. Don't worry. I very much took charge of what I was doing, and I just absolutely out-trained myself. And I trained so much, which was very lucky because, like I said, my friends were getting into the wrong things. Now, as I sort of grew up and I was 14, I was captaining the men's tennis team for Middlesex. I played at Queen's, I played at Road to Wimbledon, and I remember being in the position where this was probably the first time where I didn't know at that point, but I didn't understand what emotional regulation and fortitude was. I saw everything as a fight. And as a rugby player, if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll know that I've got a face like a jigsaw puzzle. If you're not, I've had over 300 stitches in my face, my ear ripped off twice, played with a broken jaw. I'm that way inclined. When you're playing tennis, that's not very helpful because I was my own worst enemy. And again, this probably sums up why I'm so such a big advocate of people actually learning around self-awareness, because I think if I did that, I maybe have played a bit further. But I got to Road to Wimbledon, and I remember I was on my first game, and I walked into the court, and I was playing against this little Asian kid, and I was 15 or 14, I can't remember. And he looked about 11, and I thought, I'm going to absolutely smash this kid. And then he beat me with 6-1, 6-love. And what he didn't do is all he did was put the ball back in the court and he made me beat myself up. And again, that's probably many would realise that as a common trait when it comes through to high performance is actually usually physically, if you follow the yellow brick road, you're going to have the reward of being fitter, faster, stronger, and whatever it is. Actually, the inner game is where you actually find peak performance. And at that moment, I didn't realise what that was. And I think from the rest of my athletic career, that was the biggest thing that I needed to discover. So at that point, I left. I pulled the pin from tennis. I went home and I said to my dad, and again, people will know this around like flow states and stuff. As it is, when I played tennis, I never had that feeling where time stopped. I forgot. I used to play tennis and just to be worrying. Whereas when I played rugby, I was in this state where I just absolutely loved it, and it's something that you'll never get back once you leave rugby. But that massively made me. And at 16, I decided to take the plunge and leave home. I had a tennis scholarship to Kingston College where I had an opportunity to go to America if I got top seed when I graduated, but I decided not to take it. I decided to go to Hartpury as a nobody. Hartpury in Gloucestershire, so I'm originally from London. I left home, moved there on campus. Rugby players away from home, birds or whatever. Like I was absolutely living the dream, but I went there as a nobody. After my first year, I was captain of the under-18s and I signed for Gloucester A, the Gloucester Academy. And that's sort of where my rugby journey started, where I realised that actually I've always wanted to be a professional athlete and I always wanted to be recognised. And I think that's probably an oxymoron, as that was one of the best things about me, but also one of my downfalls was I was doing it to prove other people that I could do it. We'll go into that later around inadequacy and understanding that sort of mechanism from an emotional standpoint. But at that period of my life, it was all or nothing. Rugby was absolutely everything to me, and I was going to play professionally. I was going to win. I was going to be the best, and I was going to be the next whoever. As I went into uni, I had a full scholarship, and I went and I decided that I was actually reversing back when I was 18. My dad emailed Rob Baxter and just basically said I wanted to go to Exeter Uni and could I trial for Exeter Chiefs, which I went down to Exeter Chiefs, got in. I was about to start Exeter Uni, and again, from a leading yourself standpoint, this is a big mistake that I made. My whole life was in Gloucester. All my comfort was in Gloucester. All my friends, my previous missus, my rugby, I knew all the tricks of the trade in Gloucester, and I'd actually become a new person. I developed from this Ali G white boy from London to a bit of a Gloucester farmer who loved being in the countryside and loved being with my friends there. Moved to Exeter and I was an alien. And what I didn't do is I didn't rise to that challenge as much as I should. What I did is I sunk back into comfort, and I had an opportunity to move back to Hartpury with a scholarship, in which I took it. And again, you can always have self-reflection in these, but that was the not the beginning of the end, because if I didn't get what I got a master's degree and a degree through playing for Hartpury. So it actually set me up for life. If I was to give myself back from just an athlete frame, that was the point in which I should have leant in and gone, do you know what, this is the most uncomfortable thing I've ever done. I'm playing with the best people I've ever played with. Lean in. Would I have played any higher? I don't know. The year after that, they got promoted. Again, we can't really go back and see. But I went back to Hartpury, where actually I gave my scholarship back after the first year. I played RFC and I wasn't getting any game time in the first team. So I moved to Stourbridge in National 1 and then Cinderford. And that's where I actually cut my teeth. And I cut my teeth as a man in a rugby position. And I think this is where those that know me, on a rugby pitch, I was always captain or vice captain, or I was always a massive point of difference with people, because I was very much a case of someone who could get the best out of people. And I never understood why. I'm extremely passionate. I'm extremely energetic. Rugby was the only place where I could legally basically be violent. And I had this little demon inside me that as a rugby player, Cinderford taught me the dark arts of rugby. And if you came to Dockham Road, shout out to the boys, old mining village, no matter how posh or how much money you had or how good of a rugby player you were, that place was horrible to play at. And we were vile. So I was there, I captained Cinderford, I was one of the youngest captains to have. And then I basically, at that point, I was approached by Hartpury to get a master's degree. And at that time, I was very much a case of I was still chasing the dream. I was still chasing, I wanted to be pro. I still wanted to have that. But I was also from a family which knew that actually a master's degree was a gateway and a key to all sorts of post-rugby. And it was a choice to give myself a platform for later on in life, which now I'm very grateful for. Was it the best decision? Again, like I said, the Exeter thing, you can always go back. I don't know. So from that position, I moved back to Hartbury. And that's probably where I started to grow up. We're obviously getting older. I was, I think, about 22, and we actually hired. We bought we didn't buy. We rented a livery yard. So for horses, my previous partner was an equestrian rider. And we had a livery yard. We had 13 stables. We had 4 acres, an indoor school, and I finished my master's degree and I went back to Cinderford. And this is, again, your people will learn this, is that I was not living the life on my terms. And I talk to a lot of people in the leadership space, and the people that I work with now, and people that are operating at a high level, high achievers, driven individuals, that they don't know how to have hard conversations. They run out there. It's easier for them to live with a little bit of pain than it is to make huge change. It's easier for them not to have that conversation because they don't like conflict. I was that person. All I cared about was rugby. Me and my previous partner were not happy together. It was extremely toxic, and we drifted away. I've been with her since I was 18. And anyway, I moved back to Cinderford, and finally a year later I got signed. And at that point, I was working 3 jobs. I was working as a semi-professional rugby player. I was working as a PT. I was also I did all sorts of stuff. Worked in construction, and then I worked on a farm, and then I worked in a high spectrum autism school, which was one down from basically a mental asylum in some respects. Like I said, they were very, very highly violent, and not meaningfully, obviously, but it was. They saw a big dude and thought he could be a bouncer, put it that way. So that was an extremely hard job, and working a farm. So I didn't have any days off. Signed for Doncaster Knights. They just came down to National 1. They were looking for a back row, and this was my shot. This was my time, and I'd worked the best part of 10 years to get that, and that was literally my thought in my head was, this is my lucky break. And I think you put all your eggs into one basket, and you want to push yourself to the next level. And for me, that was me pushing myself to the next level, and that was me about to succeed, and that was me about to be the best version of what I could be. And that's where it's all started to unravel, to be honest. I for a long period of time, I was very accepting of where I was. As I was living on a yard that I didn't want. I was in a relationship that both of us didn't want. I wasn't happy. But this is my shining. This is my North Star. And again, let's not pretend like every people had told me and I wouldn't listen. And there's a little story there where, until you actually respect yourself and understand that being a bit selfish and actually you're on this planet for you to start with, that was what I learned. And as a man, that was something the underlying story of that is your gut will be telling you something, and my advice to you sometimes is to listen. Because I was 8 weeks into my first professional rugby contract. My previous partner was living in Hereford Bromyard. I was in Donny, and I would travel down on the weekends. I used to have 5 dogs, and all I heard, she was lunging a horse. If you don't know what lunging is when on a cowboy film, when they've got the horse on a long rope around its nose and it's going around in circles, that's called lunging. And it was a youngster, never done it before, and she was using a thing called a Pessoa. If all you equestrian ladies out there, you'll know what that is. And it turned on her, and I just heard her screaming. So I ran around the corner, and she was getting trampled. So I ran in, obviously got involved. The lunge line wrapped around my leg, flipped me upside down, and he dragged me around the school. It was literally like a cartoon, literally up there, literally upside down. And I pulled myself back up onto basically onto my feet on the move. And I got hold of the strap near its mouth as bridle, and it was as if time stopped. Like, I remember it clear as day. It was literally like my life was on pause, and this horse was staring at me, breathing really, really heavily through its nose, and I can still listen to it. And it turned on a sixpence and double barrel kicked me in the side of the knee. I had a full ACL, PCL, and MCL rupture. I had bony bruising from the bottom of my feet to the top of my hip socket. Basically, my foot, my leg got snapped sideways, and I just remember that the scream was, it wasn't screaming out of pain. Like, weirdly enough, like I've been through quite a bit of other previous traumas, as I said, from breaking bones to having multiple stitches and all this other jazz. I was screaming because I thought I lost my rugby career, and that was my point. And this is, I'm not religious at all. I mean, as you say, atheist or however you want to say it. But more to the point of this was life telling me something. And I shouldn't have been there. Me and we both should have separated a long, long time ago, and we didn't because we felt like we couldn't. And this was the icing on the cake. And basically, I remember being left in a. I rang my mum, and I was screaming my head off, and she was basically nearly laughing. She thought I was joking, and I was like, "Mum, I've literally snapped my leg in half. I'm cooked." I'm 8 weeks into my first professional rugby contract. I'm training the best I've ever trained. shout out to Mike Hills, he was the 7 for Donny, but during that period, he was a very high level ex-professional athlete in London Welsh and stuff. I was pushing him because he was, and I wanted to get the shirt, and I felt like I was on the next piece of that puzzle of actually, do you know what, I could take this to the next level, because Donny, we were going to get promoted and then go back into the championship. 8 weeks later, leg snaps in half. I'm sat in a hotel a hospital. So it wasn't a hotel, in a hospital on a gurney. And the lovely nurse was like, oh, I'm not sure if you may be okay. And she picked up my foot and she just kept walking with it. And she took it to about 45 degrees. She's like, no, your leg's not in a good place. So there's a point in your life where you have this like eureka moment where you go, I've really fucked up here. And I've always been that person that protects everybody else. I've been that person that leads everybody else. I've been that person who wants to be at the front of someone's pain because I know that I can take it and I can help them with it. And also, I'll take responsibility if I'm wrong. I've always been a leader by nature. I've been lucky enough to have that through. My dad had a saying of be daring, be different, be decisive, and I've lived my whole life through that. But I'm on this gurney in a pair of trousers that don't fit, odd wellies, a t-shirt that was bought from a car boot sale, and I just was like, well, what the fuck are you doing? I was young. I think I was just about over 25, and I just didn't know what to do with myself. And anyway, long story short, I was then Derek Bickerstaff took me on as a client. I needed to get my knee done, and that was the beginning of the end. I lost my house. I couldn't afford the payments, so we packed up shop. I moved in. My mum had my operation a month later, where it was one of the first ones they did where they did the ACL piece and MCL at the same time. So I got dead people's ligaments in my knee, and then my MCL my hamstring was used to cover my MCL, which ended up actually blowing the fitting and having to have it redone. And then within 4 months, me and my previous partner just couldn't stop arguing, and we it was done. Like I wasn't strong enough at that. At some point, we should have been finished about 3 years before, and we didn't, and it just came to a head where I just picked up my dog. I was like, you know what, I can't do this anymore, and I walked out my house with nothing, literally no clothes, no zero of anything, and I'd moved into Dan Smith's house, DSFL 163 in Armthorpe. I remember driving up and I literally had one of my dogs she was my first dog, Tia, who's still here, luckily. She's the only character I know that's seen me fully at my worst. No one else has. And she's also seen me at my best too. But I remember driving back, and she's an outdoor dog, and I was sleeping on a mattress on the floor in Dan's house. No extra clothes, no nothing. And she's used to being outdoors, and I remember her sitting at the end of the bed, not understanding what the hell was going on. Obviously, she got in the bed with me then, but that was the beginning where me and my partner actually parted ways at that point. And that was where it all began. I was told I wasn't going to walk again properly. I was told that I would never play rugby again. I was told that I should be very lucky. Who somehow fought for my contract, and they said, "Okay, cool, give him a chance." And I came back and I played rugby 10 months later. I came on against Cross Keys away in the BNI Cup. Ended up captaining when I came on. And like I said, I wasn't supposed to be able to walk again. So that was the first piece. Whenever I talk about built for pressure and I talk around actually physically being able to lean into challenge, it's because I've lived it. And you get to put the stories that I have about what injuries I've had. There's a couple of others that I've had which are really strange too. Where built for pressure stems from is from a physical perspective. I am massively, massively, massively lucky to have done what I've done. But it's not lucky, it's been a process. I've gone through so much pain and suffering to learn the things that I needed to learn to get back on the pitch and dominate my performance. I played rugby for another 6 years after that. I played across the world. I moved over to Manly, played in Manly Marlins over there, came back home. And that's where I decided my wife, Rachel, who is the rock of our household. She used to be a professional GB swimmer. She used to swim for Great Britain since she was 14. And she was going for Rio Olympics. I was going to Australia. I finished. I did 2 years at Donny after that. So I did my next year. I played a whole year, and then we parted ways. I moved to Hull, Ionian. Shout out to the boys. Played up there, and I was just at a point where I'd had enough. She was going for Rio Olympics. I was going to go to Australia, meet in the middle, and then she missed the Rio time by about 0.1 of a second. And at that moment, we were driving from Filey. We were driving on holiday because we were supposed to leave each other and then not see each other for 5 or 6 months. And she was obviously broken. And I hadn't been with her long. And I met her 8 months after I broke up my previous missus, and I said I'd never have a missus until I was 35. And lo and behold, I'm now married to this amazing woman with my boy. So yes, life has changed. But I just said, well, come to Australia with me. And this is where I think where you can't learn the skills you learn through life unless you go and do it. And she moved out with me, moved to Australia, never had a job before, freaked herself out because she was now a civilian, not a professional athlete. And then lo and behold, after a couple of weeks, she was managing a cake shop standard. And she was also offered a visa because they wanted her to manage it. So you can adapt and overcome. And this is where I started learning all the skills and seeing patterns with people who operate from a physical standpoint. They operate at a high standard, to mentally being able to deal with challenge and adapt in their current situations, to actually leading themselves and ultimately leading other people. So she then got signed to a swimming team, which is energy standard. They are like the barbarians of swimming. If rugby players understand what that means, they're basically like a global team that they all get signed and they don't compete for anybody else but them. So they say swim globally. And I was in a position where I was going to go back to Australia. I was living the dream, living outside, working on a building site, absolutely happy as Larry. And I text my friend Fraser, who was in Singapore at the time, and he said, mate, I'll get you a job. Because I was going to go visit him and be a stereotype British weapon going over to Thailand with a bum bag and do that for a month. But he said, I'll get you a job. Django, I knew James Forrester. When I was at Gloucester, he was in the first team and I was in the academy. I used to work at the front desk of the gym. So I actually pulled the pin. I was a strength and conditioning coach at a school, worked at a physio, and then I pulled the pin and I was gone in 6 weeks, moved to Singapore. I had like 700 quid in my account. And I moved to Singapore because I needed to change who I was. I had played rugby my whole life and I'd come back from a career-ending injury to actually not be fulfilled with me playing professional rugby. The story there and the note for anybody that is chasing a high, hard, audacious goal is make it extremely specific. If you'd asked me 5 years before that goal what I wanted to play pro. I played pro and I was so unfulfilled and I was so upset, and I found it that I was not in a position where I was happy with where I got to. What you need to be doing is putting actually what I want to play 100 games for England, and I want to play 200 games for Gloucester, and I want to captain until I'm 35. Make it extremely specific, because if you don't make it specific, you will not be happy at the end. That's a massive life lesson. So I moved to Singapore with no money, and I PT'd. I've been in the fitness industry as now it's turning to 2025, nearly 17 years. And at that point, I've worked in so many different jobs: physio, PT, S&C coach, nutritionist. I'd had my own boot camp. I'd done loads of different types of everywhere from working in a farm gym all the way through to working in a private school. And I moved to Singapore and I was like, well, no one knows me. No one knows who I am. No one knows what I represent. And I shout out to the Wanderers, the boys. I got flown over to play rugby at first. So I flew over. I remember my first game as a blood replacement, but no one knew who I was. And then this seven, someone put a bomb up and he caught it on the 22 and he was trying to line up our 10. And I came on knowing he didn't know who I was. And I think I had a 30-metre run-up. And I've never hit a dude so hard in my fucking life. And he folded in half, dropped the ball, and the whole crowd went mental on the Padang. And again, just from a life moment, that was amazing. But that was probably the downturn of my rugby, because I actually realised I stopped enjoying it. And when you start losing that passion, you start losing that energy, that pull to do something, again, your gut's telling you it's time to move on. And I ended up 6 games in, I got blindsided in a mall and blew my rib out my chest. And that was sort of the time where I was like, I'm going to lose my job if I do this. So I've then finished rugby. I've studied to be a strength and conditioning degree, a master's degree in coaching science, loads of personal trainer qualifications. I'm at this catch-22 where I'm in a place where it's got extremely low tax. I know I can earn a lot of money. I could become the person that I said that I would and start earning and get a house and all this kind of stuff. My missus, now wife, is living in Turkey. She's living away from me. And it's like, what do I do? So I absolutely sent it with my business. And there's a book called The Alter Ego Effect by Todd Herman, which talks around that you embody somebody who you imagine you could be. At that point in my career, I did the ACA Academy and basically embodied 99% of what Phil Learney taught me, which was how to be a professional and use my coaching practice as a vessel to make impact, freedom, and to make it a business. So I went from being just a senior PT. Within a very short period, I was full to the brim. I couldn't get any more clients in, and I was charging 4 times what I was charging in Donny. So it was we were doing so well. And then Rachel actually came and visited me. We went to Thailand, and that's where it all began. Where Rach was going for Commonwealth Games. Unfortunately, a year after, she missed it from a similar. Again, it was point nothing of a second, and she was cooked. So I just said to her, right, let's go. We're moving over with me. And in that period, like that year, I had this big epiphany about who I was. Ex-rugby, ex-athletes will always struggle with their identity, because if somebody asks you, who are you? You'll say, well, I'm a rugby player. And if you ask me that now, I'm a son, I'm a husband, I'm an athlete, I'm a professional, I'm a businessman, an entrepreneur, a leader. There's loads of different vessels and scenarios where I'll put myself in, where actually what most people don't understand is that the how you see that stems from how you see the world. And anyway, Jake Ackler, shout out to you, my man. He legend. He used to be the S&C coach for Red Bull and Max Verstappen. He came over to the talk, and he talked about he felt the same thing when he'd finished working in rugby and he needed some help. And this is where I started to learn where the mental performance piece was the differentiating factor for those that could operate at a high standard. If I knew that as a rugby player, I definitely would have gone further, even with my knee injury. But I was emotional, I was violent, I would try and start on anybody, and I couldn't handle... Sorry, the door went. From that position, I was at a speaking event, and he was talking around how he used an NLP coach. Shout out Jay Headley. NLP is neuro-linguistic programming. It's basically the study of how you see the world and how you communicate this to the people around you, but how you communicate it to yourself. And I approached him straight afterwards. I said, mate, I need to speak to this guy. Give me his number. Got his number, had a call with him, and I've never felt so naked in my life. To be clear, I was not naked on that call, but I was. He exposed the reasons why I felt inadequate, why I'd played rugby in the first place, why I was struggling as an athlete, why I wasn't able to lean to sort of get over leaving rugby and who I actually was. Straight away paid him for 10 calls, and I had 10 calls that actually changed my life. I was able to relinquish control of what rugby had done to me, not in a bad way. And again, a little poignant point to any people that say, do you regret playing rugby? Absolutely, categorically not. Rugby made me as a man. Rugby made me as a friend. Rugby made me as a leader, and more to the point, I would pay any money now to get on a pitch and smash somebody and break their ribs. No one will understand that. But we're in a day and age where people are sort of going back on what they're saying. Absolutely not. Rugby for me is the best thing ever, and something that it was an identity shift. And what it did to me, it gave me an opportunity to see myself in multiple different variations and different scenarios, and who I was, why I was doing it, the mechanisms behind why I had this big thing. I wanted to prove everybody right. Sorry, I wanted to prove everybody wrong, rather than actually wanted to prove myself right. And something that you'll see within my whole content and what I speak about in the leadership space is about who are you, what do you do, and why do you do it? And then actually be able to unpack that and give you a reason behind that process. Because if you can do that, you're not unstoppable, but you're unbreakable, because you can adapt, you can overcome. So I had NLP coaching. I took the NLP coaching course. And then suddenly I was, Rach moved over to Singapore. And that's when my coaching business took off. I was the lead PT at UFIT. I was the head guy there. I had 5 job promotions. I was working with the absolute cartoon characters of people that were heads of banks, who were worth multi-million dollar. They were the owners of multi-million dollar companies, or they were operating at a seriously high level. And that's where leadership performance came in for me. I realized that I had a special gift of being able to actually help the human inside of someone's performance. I could actually make them physically, mentally, and emotionally sharper and keep their edge, because I realized that they were human to start with. I didn't just give them principles of practice. I've spent over nearly £150,000 English on extra education on top of my degrees. Everything from nutrition, functional medicine, biomechanics, NLP, psychology, all these things that enable, I feel, a modern day leader to have. And in that position, we were at a point where we pushed that needle. And I was there for 5 years. I had the best time of my life. I've traveled around the world. I've seen so many cool things and done so many cool things, and things that I can go into Bali with my family and all sorts. And then COVID hit. And that's when the big boom of the online fitness realm. I mean, I lost 90% of my business, and I made 84% of it back in the first month in COVID. And that's when I realized that actually coaching for me was about impact. We were in Singapore for 2 years. Singapore was during COVID, and it was, horrendous. It was savage. Being away from home, I'm not earning as much money, I'm not able to spend that much money because you couldn't go traveling. And then the UK opened up, and Singapore shut back down. My wife broke. Rach was like, right, what are we doing here? Sister was having a baby, brother was having a baby, family were getting older. And that was, I came back home laughing, and I walked in and she was crying. And I literally just said to her, do you know what? We're putting the pin. And she said, what do you mean? I said, we're done. We're out of here. So Rach went back. We packed up. She went back in 4 weeks. We had pack shop. I was pack shop in 8 weeks. I was done. And this was literally not a do or die, but it was burning. There's obviously an analogy of actually burning the boats and all that kind of stuff. That was what we did as if it all went wrong, I could go back to Singapore. But I'd become the person that I said that I wanted to. I'd reinvented myself, and I'd earned enough money to realize that actually I knew what I was worth, and that was huge. And in that time during COVID, me and my wife, I got engaged. We were supposed to be married in the UK. We couldn't, and so we were waiting so we could come back home. We had to get married in Singapore because a few different reasons from how visas worked and what have you. So we actually got married, and then we obviously moved home. So we were dialed in to get married the year after, and it took 6 months for us to buy a house. We literally bought a house in Manchester by mistake. Well, one of our best friends, Tommy Hughes, my man, lives here. I don't really know anyone else. It's an hour from Rachel's family. They live they live near Stoke. My dad's from there, and we bought a house in Staley Vegas, and we bought. And then, so reversing back a little bit, that's the Station Collective was born during COVID, and that's what my first company was. It's a strength and conditioning business that operated and helped athletes and professionals dominate their physical performance through nutrition, high impact behaviour, and strength and conditioning. Basically, we bought a gaff in Manchester, and then we moved in. And 3 days later, I got a phone call from my mum, and basically that my dad was sick. He had pneumonia, and he then had a scan. They found black spots on his lungs. I knew what that meant as someone who works in the health and fitness space. I knew that was lung cancer, and I literally packed up my stuff and moved back home. So I moved back home, and at that point, you obviously people that have been through that before. Unfortunately, it's part of life, but your whole life flashes before you. You don't know who you are because you suddenly know that something's going to happen where you're going to step away from being the child of the house to becoming the man. You're obviously. I was 30. What am I? 35. I was 33, and it hit us all a bit blindsided us. It basically we've got an inherited gene from my dad. Smoked 30 years ago and stopped 30 years ago, but it was like a ticking time bomb. He thought he was just getting old. He was very fit. He cycled a bike 12k a day. Didn't eat shit. He was small in relation to like BMI and that kind of stuff. And he went to go and get scanned, and he had cancer from his little toes all the way to his forehead, like everywhere. The most horrendous disease I've ever seen, and he passed away unfortunately 4 weeks later. Definitely the hardest time of my life. Like obviously watching someone get absolutely crippled who had done all the things you're supposed to do. Eat healthy. He had a triple heart bypass at 40. He had the fastest recovery in the hospital they'd ever seen. Was playing tennis like 6 weeks later. Like obviously a superhero to me. But we got married in Singapore. I'm not religious, so he was supposed to marry me and Rach. Unfortunately, he couldn't, and we had to. My dad's funeral was on the Monday, and my wedding was the same week on the Saturday. So again, like from an emotional standpoint, it was horrendous. But I was so lucky to have him as a dad. He was an absolute superhero to me and a superhero to my family and other people. And I had someone. It was funny. I was at a mentorship not long ago. We were talking about what would you want to feel as someone at your funeral. And a lot of people will talk about impact and money and all this other jazz. My dad had 500 people strong in there, and every single person said that he changed their life. Whether it was be a support mechanism, whether it was given one piece of advice, whether it was just be there, whether it was show them the way, or etc., etc. That for me is why I do what I do now, is have that impact on somebody, because that's why I coach. And I was lucky enough that I've become him. And I'm not going to go through grieving mechanisms and talking about psychology of that. That'd be for a later episode. But in layman's terms, this is where it all stemmed from. The pressure I put on myself now to provide more impact stems from I've seen it happen where you're haven't got a given right to be here. And from a leadership standpoint, it then sort of we're on the growth pathway, very much attack mode, etc., etc. And then I got to a point with my side of my business where I wasn't quite sure what I was doing apart from just the strength conditioning and nutrition. I love personal connection, and it took some personal development coaching to unpack actually what Built for Pressure was. Shout out to Kira from Holistic High Performance. I've worked with her, and that was it. Built for Pressure was born. I realized that what I did is I helped high-level professionals reconnect with their performance. I helped them explore the inner landscape of their mental and physical and their mental and emotional platform that they use for them to see the world and how they operate. And more to the point, become more resilient through built for pressure mechanisms of understanding resilience and leadership through high pressure environments. I've done that since Singapore. I've done that since rugby. I've done that since me personally through all my whole process, and that's where built for pressure happened. So we've been operating in. I've been operating in the high performance consulting space for a while. Built for pressure as a program has been invented over the last 5 months. It's taken over a year for me to get everything in a line to make this happen, and also to bring this podcast to those that want to lead themselves so they can lead others, find that 1% and find their edge, and also connect with people, because I know full well that being this driven is a lonely place. I full well know that it is not normal for you to want to achieve so much, and also it pains you to slow down because you want to live life at 100 miles an hour. That's what I specialize in. That's what we're going to be bringing information to you for. And what more to the point, we're going to actually be building a community of like-minded leaders who are going to take this leadership, this word leadership, and develop a whole new meaning to modern day leadership. So anyway, I digress. That's my story. There's a few bits that maybe I've missed, but I tried my best. I hope you guys like this. I'd love to know more. Know, like, and share. Please share it with your friends and share it with other those that you know that are trying to lead themselves and they're currently struggling. We'll be doing this on a weekly basis. We'll be setting a date where this will be coming out, and this will be a piece moving forward. We've got some cool guests coming behind the curtain. I've already got Gareth Timmins involved if you guys want to look at 0.1%, and I've also got Kira from Holistic High Performance. Those are locked in, and more so we'll be getting in cool guests and giving you actionable takeaways so you can dominate your leadership and your performance. So anyway, I digress. Hope you're good. I hope you're well. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll catch you next week.